You were handed a story before you could walk. Not in words, not in books, but in glances, rules, reactions, in the way adults tensed up around bills, in the way kids who asked, "Why do we need money?" got dismissed with half smiles or warnings to be realistic. It was all around you. The gold stars in school, the pride in being busy, the quiet reward for being obedient, the shame in asking too many questions. By the time you could count, you already knew money was the measure of worth. And not just having it, earning it the right way, through hard work, through respectable jobs, through playing by the rules. That's the first part of the lie. That work equals value. That effort equals morality. That the system you were born into is neutral, maybe even fair. But let's back up. Look at a child. Watch how naturally they explore, how they make, break, rebuild. How often they ask, "What if?" Now picture them at 18, buried in deadlines, student loans, performance metrics, debt. What happened in between? What happened is we turned curiosity into compliance, because that's what systems require. From an early age, we're taught to equate obedience with goodness. Good kids sit still. Good students memorize. Good adults show up on time and don't ask for too much. The idea of earning a living is baked in early, as if being alive isn't enough, as if your right to exist is conditional on what you produce, on how well you perform. There's a line people say a lot. Life's not fair, but if you work hard, you'll be okay. It sounds comforting, but dig a little deeper and it's chilling. Because what it really means is, don't question the game. Just play better than the others. Your family likely believed in this. Most do. Not because they're blind, but because they were handed the same script. And when you're surviving, questioning the script feels dangerous. So they pass it on. They push you toward stable careers, praise you for long hours, tell you to save every cent just in case, teach you to fear instability more than stagnation. And slowly, you internalize it. You stop asking what the game is. You just try to win it. It's not just parents. School does the same thing. Faster, colder. The bell schedules, the multiple choice morality, the grading curve that pits everyone against each other for the illusion of merit. You learn to measure your worth in GPA and test scores and job titles. You learn that money isn't just paper. It's safety, identity, status. You learn that to survive, you must comply. And when you do comply, when you check all the boxes, you're rewarded. You get your degree, you get a job, you get a paycheck. And for a while that feels like freedom. But over time, something starts to feel off. You work more, but you save less. You climb higher, but feel smaller. You produce more, but own nothing. You look ahead and see no end. And that's where the second part of the lie shows up. You were told that the system rewards effort. But look around. Does your paycheck reflect the hours you give? Or the leverage you have? Do the richest people you know work the hardest? Or own the most? Do the people with the deepest wisdom have the biggest platforms? Or just the loudest opinions? We were raised to think success is about input and output. You give enough, you get enough. But the system doesn't work like that. It rewards position, not production. It rewards ownership, not effort. It rewards obedience, not questions. The harder you work within it, the more it extracts from you. You might not feel it right away, especially if you've done everything right. Got the grades, got the job, paid the dues, built the savings, but then the ground shifts. Inflation eats your savings. Layoffs hit your industry. Debt compounds. Your time gets shorter, but your workload grows. And suddenly the story starts to crack. That feeling, you know it, that quiet panic. The one that says, wait, I did what they told me. Why doesn't it feel like I'm free? Here's a question most people never ask out loud. What if it was never meant to make you free? What if stability was the bait and obedience was the hook? What if the goal wasn't to empower you, but to keep you productive, distracted, contained? And what if everything that feels off isn't your fault, but your system working exactly as designed? Not a conspiracy, not a mistake, just a machine built for extraction, disguised as opportunity. No one told you that as a kid. They couldn't. Most of them didn't know, but now you do. And once you start to see the edges of the illusion, it doesn't stop there. Because next comes the part they really don't want you to think about. The money itself, where it comes from, what backs it, how it loses value while you sleep, and why every hour you sell is worth less. The longer you believe it's secure, that's what we'll look at next. But for now, just sit with this. Maybe the system isn't broken. Maybe it's just functioning as intended, and maybe you were never meant to win, only to keep playing. Let's talk about money, not how to make it, but what it actually is. Because the truth is, most people spend their entire lives chasing something they never fully understand. You're told early on that money is real, solid, earned, that it's the product of effort, of time, of moral discipline, that it means something. But the money you're working for, clocking in, saving up, budgeting carefully, it doesn't quite work the way you think it does. It used to. Once upon a time, money was a stand-in for something real. You could take a paper dollar and trade it for actual gold. Not metaphorical value. Actual metal. Then, one day in 1971, the President of the United States, Richard Nixon, stepped in front of a camera and quietly snapped that thread. He took the dollar off the gold standard. Just like that, the tie was cut. And now, your money is backed by trust. That's the official word. But really, it's backed by faith in government, by military stability, by social inertia. Not by anything you can hold or weigh or melt down. We call it fiat currency. Fiat, as in decree, as in, this has value because we say it does. That's a strange thing when you stop to think about it. You wake up, go to work, trade hours of your life for these little digital tokens, and they only mean something because someone else agreed to pretend they do. And it gets weirder. Because the people who issue this money, they can make more of it, anytime. Let's talk about money. Not how to make it, but what it actually is. Because the truth is, most people spend their entire lives chasing something they never fully understand. You're told early on that money is real, solid, earned, that it's the product of effort, of time, of moral discipline, that it means something. But the money you're working for, clocking in, saving up, budgeting carefully, doesn't quite work the way you think it does. It used to. Once upon a time, money was a stand-in for something real. You could take a paper dollar and trade it for actual gold. Not metaphorical value. Actual metal. Then, one day in 1971, the President of the United States, Richard Nixon, stepped in front of a camera and quietly snapped that thread. He took the dollar off the gold standard. Just like that, the tie was cut. And now, your money is backed by trust. That's the official word. But really, it's backed by faith in government, by military stability, by social inertia. Not by anything you can hold or weigh or melt down. We call it fiat currency. Fiat, as in decree, as in, this has value because we say it does. That's a strange thing when you stop to think about it. You wake up, go to work, trade hours of your life for these little digital tokens, and they only mean something because someone else agreed to pretend they do. And it gets weirder. Because the people who issue this money, they can make more of it, anytime. Just a few keystrokes at a central bank, and poof, trillions. No sweat, no labor, no time spent. But when you want more money, you have to earn it. Bleed for it. Sacrifice years, sell your time, your presence, your energy. Imagine you're on a treadmill running to collect melting ice cubes. No matter how fast you go, they shrink in your hand. That's what inflation is. They don't always call it that. Sometimes they call it stimulus or quantitative easing or liquidity injection. But the effect's the same. The purchasing power of your money decays. And here's the kicker. That's not a flaw. That's how fiat systems are supposed to work. Inflation benefits those who already hold assets, land, businesses, stocks, because their value rises along with the money supply. But if all you have is cash, you lose. Slowly. Quietly. Without every dollar you save loses a bit of its worth each year. Not dramatically, just enough to keep you chasing. You probably don't feel it at the checkout line, at least not all at once. It sneaks in. Groceries a little higher, rent inching up, health insurance swallowing your raises. And when you complain, they say it's just the cost of living, but they never explain who raised the cost or why your wages didn't keep up. And that's not by accident either. Wages rarely rise with inflation. Most employers treat salaries as fixed, not floating. So you stay at your job longer, work harder, cut back where you can, and still fall behind. Meanwhile, central banks print more money. Governments take on more debt. And somehow, billionaires get richer while you're told to skip coffee to save. If you think that sounds insane, it is. But it's not chaos, it's a system. A controlled loop of effort extraction. You provide labor, they issue currency. That currency loses value. You work more, they issue more. Repeat, they say it's necessary. That printing money is how we avoid collapse. And maybe that's true, for them. But for you, you're stuck trading your one finite resource, time, for something they can create endlessly. And then they tell you to just invest. As if that's easy. As if the game is fair. As if you haven't been conditioned to fear risk since childhood. You probably know someone, maybe it's you, who feels paralyzed by investing. It's not laziness, it's trauma. Because if you grew up watching your parents struggle, or if you were told, never gamble with your money, then you learned early, safety means saving. Risk means ruin. But in a fiat system, saving is slow death, because the ice cube is still melting. And while you're being careful, someone else is leveraging debt, buying assets, watching them inflate, and turning your caution into their profit. Ray Dalio talks about this cycle. He calls it the long-term debt cycle. Periods of rising debt followed by tightening, then collapse. And always the ones with assets survive. The ones with income don't. Saifedean Ammous in the Bitcoin Standard lays it out even harder. He calls fiat money a tool of theft. Slow, systemic theft of value from workers to central institutions. You don't need to agree with all his conclusions to see the shape of what he's pointing to, because you feel it. You've probably felt it for years. That sense that you're doing everything right, and yet somehow you're treading water. Or worse, sinking. You might blame yourself. A lot of people do. Think they're just bad with money, undisciplined, irresponsible. But what if that's not true? What if the system was designed to make you feel that way? Because people who think they've failed don't rebel. They just work harder. They try another side hustle. They read another finance blog. They try cutting expenses just a little more. Maybe this year they'll finally catch up. But you can't catch up to something that's always moving the goalposts. It's not about effort. It's about leverage, about access, about how close you are to the faucet that makes the money. And unless you're the one printing it, you're downstream. So when someone tells you money isn't real, it's not just a philosophical idea, it's a warning. Real things don't evaporate overnight. Real things don't get printed into existence. Real things don't lose 20% of their power in a year because of a war on the other side of the globe. But your money can. And yet we're told to base our whole lives around it. Your job, your dreams, your family planning, your healthcare, your retirement. All pegged to a currency designed to fade. That's not freedom. That's dependence. That's behavioral control through invisible levers, and maybe the wildest part? Most people defend it. They'll fight for the system that slowly erodes them because they think it's all there is. That's the real genius of fiat. It doesn't just inflate prices, it inflates belief. Belief that this is normal, inevitable, necessary. And if you try to question it, you'll be told you're naive, or paranoid, or some kind of idealist. But maybe you're just awake. Maybe you're finally seeing the shape of the machine. Because once you understand how money's created, you start asking different questions. Like, if they can print trillions for war, why not for healthcare? Or, if money is infinite, why is your labor treated like it's disposable? Or simpler, why am I still struggling when there's clearly more than enough? You won't get answers. Not honest ones. But asking the questions breaks the spell. Because the more you see the money for what it is, a shrinking token, not a store of time, the more you start looking for something else, something real, something that holds its shape. But before we get there, you need to understand one more thing. The job you're doing, the salary you're getting, it's not what you think it is either. Not a gift, not a path to freedom, not even a fair trade. It's the second half of the trap, the leash made of numbers. And we're going there next. You were told a job equals freedom. That once you earn your own money, you'd finally be independent. Make your own choices. Live life on your terms. But somewhere along the way, that freedom started to feel like routine, like fatigue, like a tight loop you couldn't quite explain. And here's the thing no one says out loud. A salary can feel a lot like a leash, not right away. In the beginning, it feels like a door opening. Your first paycheck, your name on the contract, your own income, it hits different. You feel like you're finally in control. But then it starts. You don't notice at first. It creeps. You begin organizing your life around payday. You adjust your weekends to recover from your weeks. You turn down opportunities because you can't afford to lose this job. You make decisions based not on want but need, because rents do, because benefits matter, because maybe next year. And just like that, freedom becomes maintenance. You're not poor, but you're not free either. You're stuck in the middle, the salary trap. Just comfortable enough not to scream, just constrained enough not to leave. This isn't about being ungrateful. That's the guilt trap they use to keep you quiet. It's about the terms of the trade. You sell your time, your energy, your presence for money you don't control in a system you didn't design to survive in a world that punishes stillness. And the worst part? Most of the work doesn't mean anything. Graeber called them bullshit jobs. And you probably know exactly what he meant. Jobs where the actual function is unclear, the meetings never end, and the value, if there is any, feels like smoke. You push numbers, you rearrange slides, you write emails about updates for projects that feel designed to never quite finish. But you're still tired at the end of the day. Your brain's cooked, your shoulders ache, your patience thins out. You're exhausted without doing anything real. That's the soul-deep fatigue no one wants to talk about. It's not from overwork, it's from undermeaning. Because your instincts know the difference. You can work hard when it matters, but being busy without purpose? That's a slow kind of dying. Still, you keep going. Because the alternative feels worse. Because quitting feels like failure. Because you were taught that not working is shameful, lazy, irresponsible. And so you stay. You stay even when the raise is 3% and inflation is 8%. You stay when management restructures your whole department overnight. You stay when you can feel your stomach tightening every Sunday night. You stay because what else is there? And every time you question it, someone says, at least you have a job. That line, that trap, the same one used to silence people through wars, layoffs, factory accidents. Be grateful, don't ask questions. This is just how life is. But who decided that? Who decided that your worth is measured in hours worked, not outcomes created? That your loyalty is more important than your clarity? That your presence at a desk is more valuable than your actual mind? It's subtle, but you've seen it. The people who climb fastest aren't always the best. They're the most compliant. The ones who stay late. Say yes. Swallow discomfort. Signal loyalty. It's not that effort doesn't matter, it does. But effort without ownership is just energy you'll never get back. And here's the uncomfortable bit. The rich don't live like this. They don't trade time for money. They trade money for more money. They own things, assets, cash flow, leverage. They're not worried about performance reviews. They're not asking for vacation days. They're not keeping an eye on how many sick days are left because they're not part of the game. They own the stadium. That's why the salary trap is so clever. It gives you just enough to feel okay, but not enough to escape. It keeps you earning, but not owning. You keep showing up, clocking in, hoping maybe the next promotion will fix it, and it might for a bit, until your expenses catch up, or your rent jumps again, or your car breaks down, or your body gives out. And even if you manage to climb high enough, say 6 figures, corner office, what then? More meetings, more stress, less time. The salary cage just gets fancier. More polished bars, softer carpet, but it's still a cage if you can't walk away without losing everything. This isn't a call to quit your job. That's not the point. It's about seeing it clearly. Seeing that this thing you've been told is your lifeline might also be your leash. Seeing that loyalty to a system that doesn't know your name is not virtue, it's conditioning. And once you start seeing it, something shifts. Not dramatically, not overnight, but slowly. You start valuing your time differently. You start asking questions like, Do I own anything? You start wondering what your days are actually worth and who gets the benefit. Because here's a simple test. If you stopped showing up tomorrow, how long would your employer feel the impact? Now flip it. If your employer cut you loose tomorrow, how long would you feel the impact? That's the imbalance. That's the truth. And it's okay if that truth stings. It's supposed to. It means you're not numb. So the next time someone tells you to be grateful for your job, you can nod, smile, and keep your thoughts to yourself. But inside, you'll know. You're not just working, you're waking up, and once you see the cage, you start looking for the key. But that key, it was never in your paycheck, and it was never in your degree. It's in what you weren't taught in school, where the next part of the story lives. School was supposed to prepare you for life. That's what they said, right? Get good grades, stay out of trouble, follow instructions, and you'll be ready. Ready for what, though? That part was always fuzzy. They didn't really say, but what you got was clearer. You learned how to sit still, how to raise your hand, how to memorize answers, not ask better questions. You learned how to wait for permission, and little by little, the edge in your curiosity got sanded down. They don't teach you how money works. Not really. They teach you how to count it, sure. How to write a check, maybe. But not how it's made. Not who controls it. Not why saving it might quietly punish you later. Ask a high school student what inflation is. Or fractional reserve banking. Or compound interest on debt. Most won't know. Not because they're not smart, but because no one bothered to show them. And that's not some accidental gap. It's structural. Because when people understand systems, they ask harder questions. And questions don't mix well with obedience. Even Illich once wrote that school doesn't educate, it conditions. He wasn't being edgy. He was describing a loop. One where you learn just enough to function, but not enough to challenge the function itself. Think about it. School is one of the first places where you're rewarded for compliance, not insight. Where being early is better than being engaged. Where the curriculum is standardized, but your mind isn't. You're measured in grades, compared in silence, ranked like cattle. They teach you to compete with your peers, but never collaborate against the structure. And when you don't fit, they medicate. They label. They say you have a disorder when maybe all you had was too many questions. But you adapted. You learned how to play the game, how to cram, how to guess the teacher's expectations, how to survive tests that forgot to test thinking. They told you school was about learning how to learn. But what you really learned was how to endure systems that don't care if you're awake, as long as you show up. Then you graduate, diploma in hand, ready to, what exactly? Open a checking account you don't understand, sign a lease you barely read, take a job with no ownership, no leverage, and a 30-year mortgage waiting at the end? That's the real curriculum, and the test never ends. Most people don't realize they were trained, not taught, prepared for roles, not freedom. You were shaped to become a dependable unit in a larger machine, not to build your own. And it's strange, isn't it? That something meant to empower you leaves you afraid to take risks. That an institution built for the future barely talked about debt, emotional health, negotiation, or wealth creation. They say, you can learn that later. But later, you're working, paying bills, drowning in interest, trying to heal from a system that forgot to teach you how to live. And the deeper you go, the more surreal it feels. Because the school system didn't evolve for your benefit. It was built for factories, for hierarchy, for predictability. That's why it looks the way it does. Rows, bells, permission slips, punishments, compliance, not clarity. Noam Chomsky wasn't subtle about it. He said schools are tools to manufacture consent, structures that reward people for accepting narratives, not challenging them. And maybe that sounds dramatic, till you look around and realize how many adults still believe that money is earned by effort, not position, that jobs are secure if you work hard enough, that the system is fair, and if you fail, it's on you. Sound familiar? It should. It was repeated for 12 years, minimum, and then reinforced by media, by workplaces, by older generations who were handed the same half-truths and told it was wisdom. So when you struggle, when you feel lost, when you realize adulthood is a constant stream of contracts, payments, fees, penalties, you assume you missed something, but you didn't. They just never taught it. Because that wasn't the goal. They taught you how to behave, not how to build. How to follow, not how to question. How to pass, not how to pause and ask, why are we even doing this? And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The way critical thought was substituted for busy work, the way risk was demonized and conformity praised, the way you were warned about failure but never taught how to recover. And maybe the cruelest part? When you do start learning, when you finally read the books, study the systems, dig into history, it's often too late to undo the debt, the career path, the emotional weight of it all. But not too late to shift. Not too late to say, wait, maybe the reason I feel behind is because I was never given the map. And once you admit that, you can start learning what matters. Not school approved, not credentialed, not pre-chewed and handed to you, but real. Real knowledge. Real frameworks, real options. Stuff that builds sovereignty, not resumes. Stuff they should have taught you but didn't. Maybe couldn't, maybe wouldn't. You can be angry about that, that's fair. But maybe also relieved. Because now you know. And knowing lets you unlearn. And unlearning clears space. For truth. For choices. For something that isn't a performance. So if school was the start of the illusion, the next step is seeing how it bled into everything else. Like the way you were told to save money. As if that alone would protect you, when really, that's another part of the trap. And we're going there next. You were told to save. From the first birthday card with a few bills tucked inside, someone whispered it. Don't spend it all. It sounded responsible. Grown up. Safe. And for a while it was. Back when saving meant something. When interest rates outpaced inflation. When a savings account could grow, not just survive. But now? Saving is where your money goes to get smaller. That's a hard thing to admit, especially if you've done everything right. No debt, no splurging, just steady discipline. Still, year after year, the numbers go up. But the value goes down. You feel it. You don't even need to look at charts. Groceries shrink. Rent rises, insurance jumps, and your carefully stacked pile buys you less. They call it inflation, as if naming it makes it reasonable. But what it really is theft. Not the dramatic kind, the slow kind. The kind that happens while you sleep. And the system counts on you not noticing. Because if you did, you might stop playing your role. See, saving is sold as virtue, as discipline, as adulthood. But in reality, it's delay. You trade time for money, then freeze that money while its value melts. They frame it as security. A nest egg. Emergency prep. But most emergencies cost more than your egg ever hatches. And here's the irony. The people telling you to save, they're not saving. Not like you are, they're buying, owning, leveraging, parking their wealth in things that grow when currency shrinks, article real estate, equities, private funds, even collectibles and farmland. Because they understand something you weren't taught. Money isn't the goal. It's the tool. And when the tool is broken, they switch to assets that hold shape. But for the rest of us, we were trained to fear loss more than we seek gain. Think about how you were taught to think about investing. As a gamble. As something for rich people. As dangerous. So we freeze. We hoard. We oversave and underbuild. We sit in cash thinking it's safety when it's really slow erosion. They told us not to take risks. But they never explained that not taking risks is also a risk. A bigger one sometimes. Because here's what they don't say. If you save $10,000 and inflation is 6%, you lose $600 in buying power without ever touching it. No bad decisions, no recklessness, just obedience. You're punished quietly, systemically, mathematically. And once you see that, the praise for smart savers starts to sound hollow. Like applause for staying in place while the ground moves under you. Michael Hudson has a name for this. He calls it financialization. Where money doesn't fuel production, it devours it. Where the economy isn't about making things, it's about extracting from the people who do. And in that kind of world, saving isn't empowerment. It's participation in your own slow decline. And again, it's not your fault. You were handed a map that leads to a dead end. Taught that working hard and saving wisely was the path to freedom, when really it was a holding pattern. Meanwhile, those with leverage play a different game entirely. They use debt, not as a burden but as a tool. Because if inflation eats money, then borrowing today and paying back later is a win. As long as what you own grows faster than the debt costs, that's what they do. Buy assets. Let inflation work for them. While you save in cash, watching the clock. Risk aversion? It's not genetic. It's trained. It's modeled. It's installed by systems that rely on your caution to stay stable. They need you to avoid risk because your hesitance feeds their advantage. You hesitate, they accumulate. You wait, they act. And when you finally move years later, it's after the upside's already been taken. So you're left with the scraps, the late entries, the overpriced deals. Then when it doesn't work out, they say, "See? You should have just saved." And the loop begins again. But here's the quiet truth. You don't need to be a billionaire. You don't need secret strategies or insider access. You just need to stop believing that hoarding money in a melting system is safety. Because saving on its own is stalling. And you weren't born to stall. You were born to move, to build, to create shape in a world that's always shifting. That doesn't mean take reckless bets. It means stop assuming the safest choice is the smartest one. It means redefining risk, not as something that threatens your survival, but something that opens your options. You can start small, real small. Ownership doesn't have to mean buying a building. It can mean skills, side income, time that's yours again. Anything that breaks the cycle of working to earn, then saving to wait. You can still save? Sure. But stop thinking of it as the finish line. It's a temporary state. A staging ground. Not where your wealth lives, but where it waits to move. And when it does move, when you decide what you want it to become, it's no longer just money. It's momentum, leverage, space. That's what the system fears most. Not rebellion, not protest, but people quietly, calmly, stepping out of the mold, reclaiming motion, reclaiming direction, reclaiming the power to say, "This game doesn't work for me anymore." Because once you see saving as slow loss, you stop sitting still. And once you stop sitting still, they can't use you as ballast anymore. They can't balance their system on your patience. And you start asking, what else was I told to trust that's actually holding me in place? Like the content you consume, the attention you give away, the screens you scroll, thinking they help you escape when really they reinforce the walls. And that's where we go next. It's weird, right? You sit down for 5 minutes, check your phone, and suddenly an hour's gone. You didn't plan it. You didn't even enjoy most of it. But you stayed. Scrolling, tapping, clicking, like something was being drained or fed. Now zoom out. That feeling, that trance, isn't random. It's by design. You're not just being distracted, you're being managed. And the currency isn't dollars anymore. It's attention, it's time, it's behavioral predictability. The screen doesn't ask for money up front. It asks for presence. And it pays you back in microdoses of dopamine. Likes, updates, comments, algorithmic validation. Tiny hits that keep you hooked, not satisfied. Think about how often your hand reaches for your phone before your brain even realizes. It's not you being weak. It's your instincts being hijacked. That's the trap. You're told you're free because no one's forcing you to scroll. But if your habits were built by something outside you, how free is that choice, really? Tristan Harris talks about this like it's a slot machine for your brain. And he's not exaggerating. Your feed is curated to keep you reactive, not reflective. The more you feel, outrage, envy, fear, desire, the longer you stay. Calm people don't scroll for hours. But anxious ones do. Lonely ones do. Bored ones. Overstimulated, under-rested, scattered people. And the system knows that, so it keeps you in that state. Not through conspiracy, just through optimization. The algorithm doesn't have ethics. It has incentives. More time on screen equals more data, equals more ad revenue, equals more behavioral control. And it's not just social media, it's e-commerce, it's streaming. It's finance apps, it's everything with a feed, a swipe, a red notification dot. You're being trained not to think, but to react. To want, to compare, to crave a fix before you know you're empty. And here's where it loops back to the economy, because when you're stuck in that state, you buy differently. You buy fast, you don't plan, you chase the feeling, not the need. Buy now, pay later? That's not a convenience, it's behavioral manipulation, subscription traps? Not features, just forgotten micro-decisions that bleed you slowly. They figured out that it's easier to control your wallet once they've captured your mind. So while you're distracted, entertained, nudged toward purchases you don't remember making, your economic agency shrinks. And what replaces it? A kind of false autonomy. You feel free because you have options, but they're not real options. It's choosing between brands you don't need. It's scrolling past choices someone else ranked for you. It's spending time in ecosystems you didn't build. And it starts to blur the lines between desire and habit. You think you want the thing, but what you really want is relief. From noise, from pressure, from the itch you can't name. Zuboff called it surveillance capitalism, where your behavior is the product, where prediction becomes power, where the goal is not to serve your needs but to shape them. That's not exaggeration. That's the model. Every time you hesitate on a product page, hover on a post, rewatch a clip, they're watching too. And adjusting, making you just curious enough to stay. Just uncertain enough to check again. Just off balance enough to keep seeking something. But what? That's the hollow part. Because it's not about what you find, it's about keeping you in the loop. And the more time you spend inside it, the less time you spend building anything real. Ideas, skills, presence, relationships, ownership. Not because you're lazy, but because your energy was fragmented, pulled in 30 directions before breakfast, and then you wonder why you can't focus. Why your goals feel foggy. Why even rest doesn't feel like rest. It's because you were never taught how to defend your attention. Only how to spend it. And again, it's not your fault. This stuff is built by people who understand your nervous system better than you do, who've run more tests, optimized more behavior flows, gamified more moments than you'll ever know. And they're not doing it to hurt you. They're doing it to monetize you. You're not a user, you're a harvestable pattern. Your moods, your routines, your weak spots. It's not sinister, it's just extremely effective. So what do? Well, first, you name it. Because the moment you see the leash, even faintly, it starts to loosen. You start noticing the way your thumb twitches toward Instagram when you're anxious. Or how YouTube pulls you in when you're avoiding something hard. Or how Amazon feels like progress when you're stuck. And once you see the pattern, you can pause. Even for a second. And in that pause, there's a different kind of wealth. Not financial, mental. You reclaim an inch of yourself. You don't owe your attention to platforms that treat your nervous system like a profit center. And you don't owe your self-worth to the feeling of being caught up. Let others chase the feed. You can start chasing clarity, not forever, not perfectly, just enough to remember what real agency feels like. Because obedience today doesn't look like chains. It looks like hyperstimulation. It looks like endless choice with no substance. And maybe if you're honest, it looks like a screen you can't look away from, even when it's making you numb. So yeah, you're being paid in dopamine. Cheap, addictive, evaporating. But once you see it for what it is, you can start asking, what kind of wealth actually lasts? And that question, that's the beginning of something else. Something still, and quiet, and yours. We'll get there in a second. But first, you need to realize you don't have to escape. You just have to exit. Quietly on your own terms. Let's be clear, this isn't a rebellion story. There's no montage, no dramatic flip of the table, no speech that changes the world. This part is quieter than that, and honestly, way more real. Because once you see the system, the way it pulls at your time, your focus, your fears, you don't explode. You exhale. It's like walking out of a loud room. Your ears are still ringing. Your body's still tense. But somewhere deep down, something's finally still. That's what the exit really is. Not quitting your job. Not burning your savings. Not buying into another extreme. Just this. Choosing to see differently. Choosing to stop confusing effort with freedom. Choosing to stop mistaking routine for purpose. Choosing, even briefly, to look at your life without the filters they gave you. And it's disorienting at first. Because no one claps for quiet exits. No one celebrates when you stop scrolling. No one hands you a medal when you finally say, I don't want this version of success. In fact, most people won't notice. Which is what makes it powerful. Because this shift, it's internal, it's subtle, but it rewrites everything. You start measuring your days differently, not by productivity, not by profit, but by presence, by ownership of time. You stop asking, how do I win the game? And start asking, do I even need to play it like this? It's not about throwing everything away. It's about not worshiping it. Money, titles, likes, promotions, none of it has to own you. They can be tools again, not gods. That doesn't mean you disappear. You still live in the world, still pay rent, still show up when it matters. But you stop performing. You stop outsourcing your worth. You stop thinking survival means submission. And here's the twist no one warns you about. The moment you stop needing the system's validation, you get leverage, not over others, over yourself. You can say no without guilt. You can rest without shame. You can pursue something real without needing it to go viral. That's the quiet exit. Not from the economy, but from its grip on your identity. You're still here. You're just not theirs anymore. You don't belong to the feed, to the deadlines, to the myth of perpetual growth. You belong to your own rhythm. And once you start moving to that, things get strange. In a good way. You realize how little you actually need. How most of your stress came from stories, not situations. You stop hoarding, stop overcommitting. You start pruning, making space. You trade urgency for intention. You might still have a 9-to-5. You might still use fiat money. You might still scroll Instagram now and then, but it's different now because you see the mechanisms, and when you see the machine, you stop mistaking it for reality. You might pick up new habits, buying local, bartering skills, holding value in something harder than cash. Not to beat the system, just to soften its hold. You start asking questions like, what if I worked less but needed less? What if I grew food, learned a trade, built something slow? What if enough really was enough? That's not romantic. It's grounded. You're not running away from life. You're just reclaiming the parts that were quietly outsourced. Your energy, your mornings, your attention span, your weekends. You take them back. Not all at once, not perfectly, but intentionally, consistently, on your terms. That's power. Not the loud kind. Not the empire-building kind. The kind that lets you sleep better. Because you're no longer being harvested. You're living, not performing. You're resting, not escaping. You're working, but not worshiping work. And if someone asks what changed, you probably won't have a big answer. Just a quiet smile. And maybe a few words. I stopped pretending the system made sense. Or, I stopped thinking I was the problem. Because let's be honest, you were never lazy, never broken, never too late. You were just surrounded by noise, by myths, by systems that needed you obedient, not awake. But now, you see it. And no one can take that from you. Not your boss, not your government, not the market, not your past. They don't own the new framework you're building inside. That's yours. It doesn't trend. It doesn't scale. It doesn't need an audience. It just works. Quietly, softly, every day. And that's what freedom actually feels like. No fanfare, no fireworks, just the sound of your own thoughts, finally getting a word in.